Greenlight Network presents Football Time.
Welcome to the Football Time Show. We're here for Week 13 of the NFL season. Week 12, we still probably don't have any idea who the top teams are in the NFL. But here to try to sort that out and get us on the right track is Achilles Rain. We're going to see if we can find our 5 mutuals and then give our best bets of the week. Are you ready to dive into Week 13?
Yeah, I'm as ready as can be. It's been a rough couple of weeks for favorites and for picking at all. And if you're a Ram fan, it's been doubly depressing.
Yeah, definitely so. And I think last week was probably the first time I had only made 3 NFL bets in a very long time. Now, granted, I made some first touchdown bets and some fun prop stuff, but money wagered. I bet on 3 games last week and went 2-1. So that's how out of it I'm sort of am right now. Let's talk about last night's Thursday night football game before we get in fully into the weekend games. Cowboys sort of back on track. They still don't look, I'd say, all that smooth. That Saints team really didn't offer anything. Even with Taysom Hill back, they had a little bit more juice, I thought, on offense, but their receivers are just beyond poor. Without Kamara, they can't seem to get the running game going. So Cowboys get back in the win column there, but they don't look anything really like the team we probably saw those first 6 weeks. Now, some of that can be, injuries moving in and out. Zeke doesn't look great. I'm going to touch on that in a second because I don't understand why they're even playing him right now. There's not really anything for them to play for with, the Eagles losing. Maybe Washington can maybe push them for that division. But what'd you make of last night's game?
I thought it was a little bit disappointing. I actually had a couple of bets on this game. I had under 43.5 points, and I had
the pick sixes always get you.
Geez, I was watching that game. It was pretty uneventful going into like the second half, and the Saints got the ball back after a turnover by Dak Prescott, and I thought, okay, this is my shot. Taysom's going to drive down. They're going to get a touchdown. Time's going to run out, basically, and they're going to lose by 3, which is exactly where I wanted it to be. I would have hit just about every single bet I had on that game. But, of course, he ends up throwing an interception. They threw a flag. I was hoping it was on the Cowboys, and it turned out to be on the Saints. So you got a pick 6 there, and it just kind of went downhill from there. But as you mentioned, the Cowboys don't look like the same team that we saw over the last, the first 6 weeks or so, where they looked like a very potent offense and a very stingy defense with the ability to cause turnovers. It's definitely slowed down a lot, which, being realistic, we didn't expect that type of level of efficiency from that defense to continue for an entire season. It's unrealistic, but it definitely feels like a different Cowboy team as a whole. So overall, they got the win, so they got back on track, but they haven't looked great. And I think it's a little concerning if you're a Cowboy fan.
Yeah. I think, from our conversations, I think it was week 6, maybe week 7. I really did think the Cowboys could make a run here in the playoffs. And, depending on who gets in, I mean, they look prime, for a first round exit here. And I think they could probably get back to it. Cooper was back, Lamb was back. Now we'll touch on the Zeke thing. He's clearly hurt, but they keep putting him out there. And, it's not like a Giants situation where your backup running back is like Devontae Booker, so you have to play Zeke. I mean, the best player in that game yesterday was probably Tony Pollard. So I don't understand why the Cowboys keep pushing Zeke out there on a bruised knee when you could have basically rested him on the Thanksgiving game, rested him on this game, and then you got the bye week coming up. You could have given him 3 weeks rest, and I don't think the level would have dropped, from Zeke to Tony Pollard. I just don't understand why they keep forcing the issue and forcing him carries for really no reason whatsoever. It's not like these are must-win games here.
Yeah, I mean, I have no real explanation here, but we've seen several different instances where a team is playing a player a lot of money, so they tend to utilize him more, even though the handcuff, the backup, is performing, at a much greater and more efficient pace. And that seems to be the situation here in Dallas. At least in my opinion, I feel like Pollard has been the better running back of the two. Zeke has really fallen off. Now, you mentioned he has been dealing with some injuries, but even prior to the injuries, he hasn't been quite the same Zeke that we're used to seeing. There's definitely been a drop off there. And I don't understand why you wouldn't rest him, especially when the injury issue came up. As you mentioned, you had the ability to sit him for 3 weeks with 3 winnable games and decided not to. So now it's probably going to be a lingering issue going forward. I don't think that the bye week itself will be enough to get him back to 100%. But with that being said, who's really at 100% at this point in the season?
Yeah. I just, you sort of look at that situation and then you look over at the Cardinals situation, who basically did the exact same thing. They said, okay, well, we sort of have this division, sort of locked down. Now, it would have been interesting if the Rams, coincided and played well, those weeks and put a little pressure on them. But I think because the Rams, kept losing, the Cardinals were like, well, we got found money here. We can sort of lose these games, so we aren't going to play Kyler and ride it into our bye week. And now, theoretically, Kyler's probably going to be, in and around 100% coming into this game versus the Bears. So it's just interesting with such a good backup that they, choose to keep throwing him out there. Now, I know it's a bruised knee, and it's probably, not really going to get worse, but it just seems like if you have the ability to rest somebody, probably rest them. The NBA seems to have figured that out. I don't understand quite why the NFL hasn't figured that out yet.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty simple. As you mentioned, it's not going to get worse, but it can get better. So, yeah. I mean, it's that simple.
All I know is next year, neither of us are going to be talking about the Week 13 win by the Dallas Cowboys versus the Saints. But we might be talking if they lose in the first round of the playoffs and Zeke isn't all that healthy.
Yeah, turning point of the season.
All right, let's get into this week's games. I don't really... This has just been a weird run here. Now, there's one really, really good game this week, but it's once again a lot of just bad matchups of games, I don't want to watch. It's really interesting that, usually I get fatigued about the college football season by about, week 8 or 9. And I wasn't too fatigued this year, but, last week watching those NFL games, I could just feel fatigue. Everybody just seems to not be very good. And I'm watching a lot of bad football. And it looks like we're going to watch a lot of bad football again this week.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how much of that is to blame, with the scheduling and the matchmaking. Or, I mean, it's really hard to pinpoint because I really thought that at this point in the season, we would have at least a good idea of the elites, the goods, and the bads. And I really can't tell you, I mean, other than a few really bad teams like the Jets and the Jaguars and maybe even the Texans, it's hard to really pinpoint who the really good teams are because, as I said a couple of weeks ago, anyone is beatable by just about anybody at this point, and it's pretty much, a guessing game at this point.
Yeah, that middle pretty much goes from about 3 to about 27. I think any of them, over a 2-week stretch, we might all of a sudden think of a Super Bowl contender or might be thinking they're getting a top 5 pick in the NFL draft. So let's kick things off with the aforementioned, probably the poster boy for this, Tampa Bay Bucks at the Atlanta Falcons. This number's really, really high, 10.5. If you remember the game Tampa Bay and Atlanta played, I think it was the second or third week in the season. I think we both had bets on Atlanta that week. And it got to the special 25-25, and then I think your boy Matt Ryan decided he wanted to end that game early and threw like 2 pick sixes in the last 4 minutes of the game. But Tampa goes to Atlanta, 10.5. No Antonio Brown. again this week, and probably for a little bit because he's still hurt and now he's been suspended. But Tampa Bay looked a little bit, I thought, maybe a little bit more efficient in that second half of that game. The first half of their game last week, I didn't think they looked, great again. Atlanta, there's no telling what you're, getting week to week. But what do you think of this 10.5 point spread at the Falcons here?
Far too wide. It makes me feel a little uncomfortable. And I understand that there's a big disparity between both these teams when it comes to record. But realistically, when it comes to performance, both teams have been up and down, especially the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, you probably would have thought I was going to say the Atlanta Falcons here, but the Atlanta Falcons have been a little more consistent with their bad play. Even when they play good, they're going to turn it around at some point during the second half and play bad. And that's been the story of the Atlanta Falcons this season. But Tampa Bay, there's a couple of games in that schedule where you would assume they were going to win those games, and they ended up taking L's on those. Now, that's not going to sway me from thinking that this team's a lot better than Atlanta, because they are, and they're probably going to get the win. But at a 10.5 point spread, a little too wide for me to feel comfortable taking.
Yeah, it's just a little bit too big, for me. 10.5, especially we talked about that game earlier this season where it was 25-25. I think you saw last week once again, Tampa Bay just was letting Carson Wentz pass all over him. And, basically until Wentz decided to sort of do Wentzy things and fumble and throw a pick. And, of course, the Colts mupped a punt. We'll probably get in overall to the Colts and their ability to sort of find ways to lose these games that they dominate. But, they were still getting passed on really well. I think theoretically Atlanta can still pass, but that's always, part of the course. We say that, and then they'll throw for 120 yards. I think you found that out a couple of weeks ago. But I just think 10.5 is too much. These division games, you saw it a couple of weeks ago when the Saints beat the Bucs, and I don't think the Saints have won a game since. And I don't think they've scored over 10 points basically since then. So I'm sort of a no-go on this game. The 50.5. I lean a little bit to the over, but it's probably spiked a little bit too much for me. In the first half at 6 and 25.5, I just automatically cross that off. So I'm curious, anything on this that you like at all?
Listen, if I had any confidence in Atlanta's offensive ability, because they've been, like I said, on and off pretty much all season long on offense. If I had any confidence in that offense, then I'd probably, swing a little more towards that, taking that, overrun. But as it sits right now with the way they've been playing, and Tampa Bay seems like they're getting ready to kind of go on a good stretch here. I'm not jumping on any of these. I'm just going to sit back and let the cards fall as they may. But for what it's worth, Tom Brady versus Atlanta is 9-0, including the playoffs. Over the last 3, Tampa Bay is 2-1, where Atlanta is 1-2. Obviously, the opponents they've each faced is quite different, but both teams have basically had different personalities at one point so far this season. I do predict that Tampa Bay is going to win. I'm just not confident enough to take that 10.5 point spread.
Yeah, I'm not confident enough to take Atlanta. They were trying very hard to lose that Jacksonville game, and Jacksonville was trying very hard to be like, no, we don't want this game. We'd like to continue our dreadful play and not trying to get their quarterback better. And you mentioned Tampa probably about to go on a run here. To close out the season, this schedule goes Falcons. They got a tough one versus the Bills, but then it closes Saints, Panthers, Jets, Panthers. So judging, I don't know who's playing quarterback for the Panthers. We'll get into that disgraceful game last week that I think might have broken your NFL soul. But yeah, the Bucs getting that big Colts win. They're probably about to go on a run here. We'll see how they play versus Buffalo. That's going to be interesting for Buffalo, especially coming off, this week's New England game. But yeah, pretty easy slate to close out the season for Tampa Bay. So they probably go in the playoffs a little bit like they did last year on a pretty good winning streak. But 10.5 too much for me on both sides of it. If I had any faith in Atlanta, I'd lean a little bit more towards Atlanta. All right, let's go on to the next game. This one's an interesting one. Arizona 7.5. Once again, this is really, really big spread. Kyler's probably going to play. Hopkins is back. Pretty much everybody is back for Arizona. Chicago, it's just bad matchup here. I think they'll get beat, deep pretty good, but 7.5 on the road with the way the underdogs are covered. It scares me a little bit, but I'd be more willing to grab that. I don't want anything to do with the Bears. They were pretty much bad Dan Campbell coaching away from losing that Lions game. Way to call 2 timeouts in a row, by the way. Dynamite move. Didn't know that one was in the rule book. But Arizona 7.5 at the Bears, 43.5 over under 4 for the first half, 22.5. What's your feel on this game?
I'm a little concerned. I know that a lot of people are probably going to jump in on Arizona, especially as you mentioned with Kyler Murray coming back and, Hopkins and basically the whole slate of guys coming back. And I feel like people might start to jump on it, seeing as how well they've been playing, even in the absence of their star players. But it gives me a little pause because I've seen several different instances where after a few weeks off, by a superstar player, as soon as they make a comeback, they come back first game back. There's a little bit of a setback, and that's usually due to the fact that they haven't been playing, they haven't been practicing, and it doesn't matter how much you practice, you can never really, simulate what an actual game is going to go. Now, granted, these guys are all professionals, and they've been in several, actual games. So you can take that as you may, but I feel like with this first week back, I'm probably going to be a little cautious and probably wait a little bit. Although I do like Arizona in this one. I believe so far this season on the road, Arizona is 6-0. They're undefeated, which speaks very highly to the coaching staff and the game plan that they put together, even with their guys being out. As we've stated before, we were probably some of the most critical people that I've heard when it came to Arizona. And they've actually surprised me. They played really, really well, even with all the setbacks that they've had. They've done a really good job. So, kudos to them. I take my hat off to Kingsbury and the coaching staff there. They've done a really good job. But at 7.5 with that little hook there, I'm probably going to wait one more week, make sure that Kyler Murray is ready to go and he looks 100% before I can jump on any Cardinal bets.
Yeah, I would be a no-go on the Cardinals. I just can't take the Bears because, speaking of coaching royalty, Nagy's being cagey with who he's going to start at quarterback. Fields was back at practice on Wednesday, but he says he's the number one quarterback, but he doesn't know if he'll start. So I don't know what the hell.
He said the same thing. He said the same thing about Dalton, remember?
Yes, I don't quite know what that...
When everyone was clamoring, everyone was basically clamoring for Fields to come in, and he was like, no, Dalton's our starter. He's the number one guy. And within a week, he was replaced. And listen, just watching the Bear games that I've seen this season, in my opinion, Andy Dalton is the best option for them to win games, if that's what they're really after. If they're after, trying to get a high draft pick, which is more than likely the case, then I think you put Fields in there and try to hope that he develops a little bit more in the process of losing games. But if you want to win, I think you got to go with Andy Dalton.
Yeah, I think that's – if you told me that Dalton was going to be the starter and play all 4 quarters and not be yo-yoed, which is what I have a feeling is going to go on here, which would drive me virtually insane if I took the Bears. But if you told me Dalton – was going to play all 4 quarters and just be the starter and they were going to hold Fields out, I'd probably push a little bit harder on taking the Bears in the 7.5. They've been much better at home. You have a West team coming, across the halfway across the country into Chicago, but it's a pretty big trip. It's going to be, 37 degrees with precipitation there. I'm not sure the boys from Phoenix are going to love that too much. But with the looming that Justin Fields might get plays. I can't take the Bears if I think Fields is going to be in there. If I think Dalton's going to be in there, I think the play would be the Bears. But because, the coaching genius wants to play funny games with who's going to be the starter, like Arizona cares who's going to be behind center. But I just probably have to be a total pass on this one as well. All right, let's go on to the next one. Speaking of the 3 games I took, this was one of the 3, and it was my loss. I stupidly delved into the world of the Chargers madness and somehow lost a game where they didn't even get beat down all that badly on defense, but offensively, once again, they were a no-show pretty much. I just can't explain that team. I can't really explain the Broncos either. One week their defense is, the 86 Bears, and then the next week and it's Swiss cheese and getting lit up. So Chargers getting 3 versus the Bengals. Bengals look to get a little bit back on track, with that win 2 weeks ago versus Vegas, and then really a beat down of Pittsburgh. 3 for the Bengals here, 50.5, 1.5 here. What's your feel on this one? Love on the Bengals, love on the Chargers here.
This one has me torn. I really like the way that the Chargers started the season off. Defensively, not my favorite unit. Flip it over to Cincinnati here, and a really young team with a lot of potential. Seems like the sky's the limit for this team. Defensively, they can show up on any given week and play really good football. And offensively, we know what they're capable of with the young quarterback and the young wide receiver. And even Mixon has been, he's been really good this season. With all that being said, these 2 teams have faced off several times in the past. And, over the last 5 meetings, the score has been decided by 1 possession. So
I think that's the Chargers motto.
Yeah, if it's not, and if they're dominating, they're going to find a way to make it close. So, that scares me. That's another thing that scares me is the fact that we've seen a couple of games this season where the Chargers look like they were going to dominate the game, and somehow they ended up just, giving in. It's because they have no defense and they can't stop anybody. Last week they looked a little better defensively, but offensively they couldn't get things going. So there's just too many question marks with the Chargers. If I had to take anything here, I'd probably lean more towards Cincinnati, who probably has a lot of momentum going on right now with 2 wins under their belt after all the media attention kind of slowed down a little bit.
Yeah, I think you summed it up. We're on the same page here. I think if we were going to take something, it would have to be the Bengals. I just don't think you can confidently bet on the Chargers because the offense has been, 1 week it's 600 yards, the next week it's 300 yards, and the defense has been pretty much porous throughout. Granted, they were a little bit better last week versus Denver, but, let's, check things down. Cincinnati poses a much more greater risk on the offensive side than Denver. So I think the lean would be Cincinnati. It's just, I think we're both wounded from them losing to the Jets, and it's something we can't sort of grapple with in our head. But basically, Cincinnati started out the season well, had that little blip for 2 games. Granted, it was versus 2 awful teams, and I think that just gets in your head. And then the last 2 weeks, they've looked more like the team the first couple weeks. Maybe they can roll that into some, but, like we've talked about this NFL season, you start to like the Bengals, and then all of a sudden we're getting 600 yards from the Chargers, and the Bengals start to, play badly again. So I would lean Bengals 3 here, but it would not be at the top of my list in my mutuals.
Yeah, I'm probably just going to go ahead and mark the Bengals as a maybe, just because as I'm looking at the slate of games, it looks like we're going to be reaching for straws here. So I'm going to put the Bengals as a maybe here.
Well, I'm going to start, if we get lower and lower, I'm going to start clicking up player touchdown props, and those are going to have to work their way into our mutuals. All right.
That's what it's come to.
let's go into this next game here. I talked myself out of the Vikings last week. I just couldn't do it. Luckily, because we got just bad Vikings. Well, it wasn't really bad Vikings. It was just the NFC version of the pretty much Chargers. They go to Detroit. The line is 7 once again. Big line for a team I just can't trust. You can't trust this Vikings team. And Lord knows what you're getting from the Detroit Lions. I mean, I think they could have a third grader who is, on all Madden level, who could come in and game plan a coaching thing better than what the Detroit Lions have last. That Thursday game was just dreadful and possibly the worst Thanksgiving Day slate I probably ever visualized my eyes to, but, pretty much summed up with the 2 back-to-back timeouts. Vikings 7, can you make yourself go there, or is that just a wounded... You're watching it as Jared Goff is driving down, throwing to I don't even know who. There's going to be no DeAndre Swift. It's just, can you stomach taking the Vikings on a 7 on the road? I think would be the play here.
Now, normally, I would say no. And hear me out here, okay? So I feel like the best weapon for the Lions on offense has been Swift pretty much so far this season. You have a few instances where, he hits a tight end here and there. It's probably the second best weapon they have on the team. But with their best offensive weapon out for this game, how are they going to muster up points? And when I look at the potential offense explosion for the Minnesota Vikings, and they have a lot of potential on offense, I feel like this could be a blowout. This could be one of those games where we look at the spread and we're like, it's a little too high for my comfort. But at the end of the game, when we're looking at the final score, we're like, it was obvious. It was an obvious pick. So I'm kind of leaning more towards my gut with this one here. I like the Vikings to win this game. They actually have won their last 8 meetings versus the Lions. So if that means anything to you, awesome. If it doesn't, no big deal. But Minnesota is a much better team. Coaching wise, obviously it leaps and bounds better. I think that the coaching decisions last week for the Lions really brought to light what some of the biggest issues for this team are. And I think they started at the top with the coaching staff. Yes, they don't have a lot of talent on both offense and defense, but even teams with very little talent can make things work. And it really depends a lot on the coaching ability of the coaching staff. And that's probably one of the spots where they're lacking a lot here in Detroit. So I like the Vikings here to cover. I think they're going to win. I think they're going to win big. And I don't feel comfortable saying it, because for me to say, I think they're going to win big when it's a 7-point spread, it definitely makes me a little weary, but I do like the Vikings here, even at that high spread.
Yeah, I think that should probably just go in your Jared or your Matthew Stafford category, that the Vikings have beat him 8 straight times. The savior for the Rams has not been able to beat the most inconsistent team in football the last 4 years. I think you have to lean Vikings now. Cook's out, but, we touched on it a little bit with the Cowboys. Alexander Madison, while he's not Dalvin Cook, is, more than a good enough running back, to sort of hold the fort here. There's not, a huge leap and bound drop off between Cook and Madison. It's a thin slate. I think maybe last week might have really broken the Lions, and I think they're going to, I don't know what you call a 16-1 season, but it's definitely
a success.
Not that good. So I think we probably got to put the Vikings down 4-7 here, and then be disappointed when the Lions, score.
Win their first game of the season.
Yeah, pretty much.
That's how it might go down. Watch.
All right, so Vikings -7 is our first mutual of the week. Last week we had a bunch of 1s. This week's we got a bunch of 7s, and this one's going to be tough for me to take, even though I think the Dolphins are going to go on a roll here. The Giants go to Miami. Probably the team playing the best out of, anybody other than maybe the Packers has been the Dolphins the last couple weeks. So the Dolphins sit at -6. That jumped quickly. They were getting 2s and 3s, and now all of a sudden they're a 6. 40 is the over-under, 3 is the first half, 20.5 is the first half over-under. Any particular feel one way or another on the New York Giants, Miami Dolphins?
I'm kind of on the same boat as you. Miami's actually been really hot over the last few weeks. Just looking at their last 3 games, you're talking about a win versus Carolina. Granted, I know they're dealing with the quarterback situation, but that defense for Carolina can be really good at times. A win versus New York Jets, again, another team with struggling quarterback situation, but can defensively play pretty well at times also. And a win versus Baltimore, which I think is probably the most impressive out of the bunch there. Listen, Tua's been kind of picking things up a little bit. They've kind of been getting hot. If you're going to get hot, this is definitely the right moment to get hot. Defensively, they've been getting better, it seems, week to week. A lot of that has to do with who they've been playing. But, we've also seen these same teams that have no offense beat some elite teams. I look back at that Jacksonville-Buffalo game. I don't think anybody gave Jacksonville a shot other than Jacksonville fans, and they ended up winning that game. So I think the Dolphins can pull this one off. I am a little concerned. The Giants seem to be one of those teams that are kind of like a dark horse. They'll beat you when you're not expecting them to beat you, like last week versus Philadelphia, when I'm sure 95% of the country probably thought the Eagles were going to run away with that one.
They scored an offensive touchdown in that game and somehow managed to win.
And they still won the game. I mean, that's the part that's scary, is that a team that can win a game without even scoring points.
Well, we'll get to the Eagles next. So,
yeah. Well, listen, 4.5. I don't think it's too bad. I think that, especially with the slate of games that we have this week, it should at least go into the maybe column. I'm a little weary about taking a home team. It sounds very weird to say, but as you mentioned several times throughout the season, home teams not necessarily an advantage. So, I'd like the Dolphins to win this game. I don't know how confident I feel in that 4.5, but I feel like at least we have to put in our maybe column.
Yeah, I'm looking at the rest of the slate. I don't know what we could grab that we would be confident in, especially with, a handful of these teams and what we've seen. I think you just got to ride the Dolphins, that they're playing better. Tua's starting to look more and more like an NFL level quarterback. Waddle has been really, really good for them. And then the defense, overall has really started to play well and put pressure on teams. You talked about it, the Giants got a win last week, but it wasn't exactly like they started breaking offensive records all of a sudden. Jalen Hurts threw 4 picks. They found, one play in there amongst a lot of non-plays. And if Jalen Reagor, who's a paid wide receiver, could catch the ball, the Giants would have ended up losing that game, even though the Eagles turned the ball over 4 times. So I think, once again, I don't love it, but we're probably better off just taking teams that are at least hot here, because these next handful of games, I think we're just going to struggle to find one. So Dolphins it is as our number 2 mutual of the week. They've been good for us the last couple weeks as well. I think we've ridden them pretty hard here the last couple weeks. So we'll see if they continue to pay out. The aforementioned Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, just not to cut you off, but just, if you needed a little more confidence in making a pick like that, it's good to know that the Dolphins defense has given up 17 points or fewer over the last 4, opponents. So at least defensively, that they're keeping their opponents at bay and not giving up a lot of points, which bodes well for them covering that spread a little bit more.
Yeah, definitely. So, all right. Next up, we all fell in love with them. I think Philly fans thought they were about to go to the Super Bowl. Turns out They are not about to go to the Super Bowl. They probably aren't going to make the playoffs now, though. I shouldn't make those sort of statements because at this point, I think a 6-11 team might work their way into the playoffs. So
it's possible.
The Philadelphia Eagles go to the New York Jets. I think we were dubious of the Eagles line being so big versus the Giants, and once again, it's another big line. I get it. The Jets are not good, but 6.5 for this Eagles team. Do they find their mojo again, or are we just like, hey, I don't want this at 6.5? I like the Eagles better when they're getting plus or very, very low. 45 over under 3.5 for the first half, 22.5 for the over under first half. Where are we sitting with the Philadelphia Eagles here?
I don't like much in this game. Okay, I do think that Philadelphia is a better team. The question is, do they get back on track after last week? It seemed like last week the Giants really figured out the type of offense that they were going to run, and they really stifled the quarterback and really messed him up, caused a lot of mistakes from him. As you mentioned earlier, 4 interceptions, not good. But this is a Jets team that has been struggling. At times they have played really good defense, but it's been kind of in between, too few in between to really consider them to be at least a good defense. With all that being said, Philadelphia is 11-0 all time versus the Jets. I think Philly wins in this one, but I think the smarter play in this one is probably taking that under, simply because we have a lot of issues on offense for the Jets. We don't know exactly who they're going to decide to put in that quarterback. They keep naming who their starter is, and halfway through the game, guys are getting hurt, and you see a different quarterback. So we don't know what the situation is there. That Philadelphia defense, although not great, has been getting a little bit better. They can get after the quarterback, and I believe they have a guy in their secondary. I can't remember who it was. I was watching sports media, and he's actually the highest graded defensive back in the league. I can't remember what his name is, but what I'm saying is it bodes well that they're starting to pick up play in that secondary, which is probably their weakest point when we were coming into the season. And if the offense can get back to the way they played last week, I think they can win this game. But will they cover? I don't know. I think the safer play here is to probably take the under in that game. What was it, 43.5, you said?
The over-under in this game is 45 is the number.
Oh, even better. I like the under even better.
Yeah, I look at this game to play out a lot like, last week's game between the Jets and Texans. Yeah, Philly's probably a little bit better than the Texans, though. I think both teams run, similar sort of offenses. So, go ahead.
I feel like this game. Sorry, I keep cutting you off today. I feel like even if we do get an explosive offensive performance from Philadelphia, their attack has it's been based around the run. Even when the quarterback is doing it, it's all about the run. You're talking about a team that's basically very heavily run oriented. So that drains the clock, which bodes even better for that under to hit. It's just, the less time you have to score points, the lower the score is going to be. That's just at least the logic that I'm using for this game.
Yeah. You're probably talking about Darius Slay at corner for the Philadelphia Eagles that you wanted to know.
I know you'd know.
Anyway, yeah, I could see the under, and I think that would be a good play. I mentioned that, Jets-Texans game 21-14. You aren't going to get a lot of points from the Jets, no matter what. And really, if you watched Philly, I don't think you're getting a lot of offense back from them as well. So I think your call on that game is, just spot on. I think, we got a little bit burned in that New England Patriots game, Tennessee Titans last week on the under, but we were doing just fine until your boys started deciding to turn the ball over the last 6 minutes of the game, and that game went from 20-14 to about 42-17 in no time at all. So I agree.
The wife was super excited. She was sitting there screaming, and I'm like, "What are you celebrating? I'm losing money." Like, no, this is not a good thing.
Well, she probably put the mortgage on the Patriot, so you should be cheering along with her.
I guess so.
All right, we'll see. We'll go for our number 3, the under in the Eagles and Jets game. So we got 3 on the board. That should probably tell you that the next handful coming up, I want nothing to do with. Starting with the Indianapolis Colts at the Houston Texans. The Texans are brutal. Their offense has been sort of poor despite being fun to watch. And this Colts team, they live in the world of the Vikings and the Chargers and can't just blow people out. They have to sort of play things close and do things that sort of hurt themselves. So a 10-point spread on the road in a division game, I want no part of. Maybe you have a feel here. I don't want the Texans because I think they're really going to go into, ultra tank mode here, especially after losing that game to the Jets. That puts them at the bottom. That starts to climb them up for that number 1 pick. So Colts -10, 45.5 for the game, 4.5 for the first half, 22.5 on the first half over under. A feel on this game, or is this just a pretty much auto cross off with a line this big, unless you maybe have a lean towards the Texans?
Well, I'll tell you this, okay? I'm not taking the Texans, okay? And I'm not taking any action on this game. But for those that actually are looking to take some action in this game,
Jonathan Taylor touchdown. For example. Are we delving into that yet?
Yeah, I mean, can't tell you off the top of my head what that payout is, but I'm assuming it's probably at like plus 150 for him to score at any time in the game. Probably about plus 350 for him to score the first touchdown of the game. Just off the top of my head. But I will say this: if you're looking for a play here, the play would probably be to take some sort of prop bet regarding the running attack for the Colts. You're talking about the 31st ranked rush defense here with the Texans going up against probably one of the hottest running attacks in football right now with Tom. He's been outstanding. I mean, I know that, people are giving him a lot of credit. He's getting a lot of praise because he's leading the league in rushing. He's been really, really good. I will say that. I don't think he's been the best running back so far this year, although the numbers would probably slap me in the face and tell me differently. But he's been really good. And going up against a really bad run defense, definitely something that you could probably look into. The spread, I do think the Colts are going to win this game, and it wouldn't shock me for them to cover this spread. But them being divisional opponents gives me a little bit of pause. You look back at that Houston Texans and Titans game, a lot of people probably thought it was going to be an easy win for the Titans, even with all the injuries they were dealing with. And we saw how that turned out for them. So take that as you will. I mean, it's something to look into if you really need to make a bet in this game. But other than that, I'd probably stay away from a 10-point spread.
Yeah, I pulled up the thing. Jonathan Taylor, -380 anytime touchdown scorer. So you're gonna be taxed pretty heavy. I will say, first touchdown scorer, you did pretty well there at plus 290.
Okay, I was close.
So I think that's a pretty solid one, especially judging by what the Colts did. I'm a no-go in this game, but we didn't have our show to recap this week. I wanted to talk about that Colts game a little bit with you. This same thing came up in the Tennessee game. Colts get out in front, and then they seem to go away from Jonathan Taylor. Then, Tampa Bay catches up, and then all of a sudden they start handing him the ball, and he's running. I don't understand. I get it. The Colts have always been sort of a team that game plans for the opponent. But once Devin White left that Tampa Bay Buccaneers game, I don't understand why you didn't just hammer Jonathan Taylor over and over and over. I think about what that same team in your division would do, the Titans. Maybe Derrick Henry doesn't have a good first half, doesn't have a good first quarter, but they don't go away from that. They keep hammering and hammering. And I just didn't understand the Colts' strategy of just going all pass, all Carson Wentz. Something bad's going to happen. 2 turnovers happened. I get you can't, judge the muff punt, but I was curious what your thoughts on that Indianapolis-Tampa Bay game was, because they had a real chance to sort of put a lot of pressure on the Titans, and they just sort of done what they've done all year long, sort of dominate the game, but lose the game.
Yeah, that was definitely a tale of two halves. As I was watching the first half of that game, I was like, this is going to be an easy blowout. Like, I think if I'm a Titans fan, I'm starting to get a little concerned because you're talking about Tennessee losing their previous matchup and then the Colts coming out and beating Tampa Bay. And it looked like they were going to win that game. So I kind of, tuned out a little bit and was watching other games. And when I went back to it, I looked and it was a completely different matchup. It was a completely different team. As you mentioned, most teams in the NFL, when they get up big and they've got, a team against the wall, they start rushing the ball. That's how you close a team out. And for some weird reason, they decided to go against it. We've said it several times throughout, this season and even before that when he was with Philadelphia. Carson Wentz is not the guy who's going to lead you to victory. He's going to be the guy who can manage your team into a victory. And your team is going to have best success possibility when he's managing the game, not when you're putting the pressure on his shoulders. And that's kind of what happened this time around. It came back to bite him in the behind. But I didn't understand the game plan. I still don't understand it, but they took the L and now they're going to have to deal with the consequences.
Yeah, it puts them in, playoff jeopardy as well because, you're just in the mix. We've already talked about it with, 10 other teams. That seems like a overextension, but it is like 10 teams if you look at the list. Basically, everybody is
how crazy
just in
is
that
it?
pot.
How crazy is it? I mean, we're talking about week 13, and we don't have anybody that's basically on the verge of clinching.
Yeah.
I mean, it seems a little wild. I think that at this point last season, we had at least one or two teams that were basically clinched.
Well, at this point, everybody thought the Steelers were going to win the Super Bowl.
That's true. That's true.
I don't think that's exactly true, but they were sitting at like 13-0. But I think we all saw the cracks there. But anyway, there was 13-0. I think Green Bay was, 12-1, maybe 11-2. Tampa hadn't quite found their groove yet, but the Saints were dominating. Your Rams had a good record at that point.
Them in Seattle were like neck and shoulders.
Yeah, I mean, there were just teams that you knew. Buffalo was really good. Also, the Chiefs. You sort of had that pot, and you just don't. And we'll bring in two teams in this next game. It's nice because in Vegas, this is basically a craps roll here. Washington football team at the Las Vegas Raiders. Raiders are 1.5 point favorites. 49.5, 1.5 on the first half line, 24.5 on the over under here. Are you going to take the dice and make a roll here? Are you going to hit your sevens? Are you going to hit the snake eyes? Where are we going? Washington football team, hot. They've won a handful of games in a row. Las Vegas, I guess, showed a little bit of pride on Turkey Day, beat up on the Cowboys. Granted, none of the Cowboys starters were there, but still, I don't know. Do we trust this Vegas team? Do we trust this Washington team whose defense is like third since the two best players on their defense have gone out? So where are we sitting here in this game?
This is probably going to be one of those games where I'll take a toy and I'll write, Washington on one and I'll write Las Vegas on the other, and I'll toss them and I'll let my dog basically figure out whichever one he brings back to me. That's probably the team that I'm going to go with because it's basically a pick'em game. I think that both of these teams aren't, really good teams. Yes, one of them's hot, one of them's not. For the Raiders, they've been dealing with a lot of drama on and off the field pretty much this whole season, starting with the whole Gruden situation that happened. Then you had players, getting into accidents and causing harm. And there's just so much going on there. Yes, that last win against Dallas was really important for them, but I don't think that that's fixed anything. I think that they're still going to deal with their issues. Obviously, it was a really, good moment for them because they've been dealing with so much turmoil. But, you look at their last three games, they have that win versus Dallas, a loss versus Cincinnati, who was struggling prior to facing them, and a loss versus Kansas City, who was also struggling prior to facing them. Where you flip it over to Washington's side of the ball, and you've got a win versus Seattle, who, Seattle was coming out. They're trying to be hungry. Russell Wilson was back. Win versus Carolina. The re-energized Carolina offense with Cam Newton, which we'll get into in a little bit, I'm sure. And then, a win versus Tampa Bay, which is actually probably the most impressive out of those three. But as you mentioned, Washington's been hot. I guess if I had to, I'd probably lean more towards Washington getting 1.5 points. I know it's not much, but you're at least getting 1.5 points at that point. And listen, I tried to do little notes for each game. The only note I could come up with for the Washington Raider game is Derek Carr is averaging over 300 yards per game this season.
Yeah.
So that tells you all you need to know.
You mentioned it. It's just the total contradictions. The Washington secondary was getting shredded, and then, Sweat and Chase Young go out, and then all of a sudden the Washington secondary has been fixed. And I want to take Washington here because I think their offenses looked better, especially since Antonio Gibson looks a little bit healthier the last couple weeks, and they could sort of run and play action. So I think that offense has looked better. It's just, can you keep buying that the defense is going to continue to play at this level? Ron Rivera is one of those coaches that sort of grows into the season. He's better in the second half than he is the first half. But, it's a little... I look at it like an NBA thing when, like, your star goes down and you have a little 3-game, ride there where you can, you can sort of compensate for the star going out. But then as you get, later and later, I just can't think that without, Chase Young, Sweat might be back this week, but I just can't think their defense is going to have gotten better because those two are out. But I agree with you. I think the play would be Washington, but I'm not real bullish on it. But I can't make myself take the Raiders just based off last week's game with all the injuries that were involved in that, Dallas Cowboys game. So I'd be a no-go here. I might can talk myself into Washington by Sunday, but since it's Friday, I'm not quite ready to talk myself into that one.
But see, just because I know you, I know that by Sunday you'll say you've got Washington at plus 1.5.
Yeah, I know. The text is coming to you, and then I can proceed to watch Heineke throw for 100 yards, and their defense gets shredded for 400 by Carr.
And you're going to be like, wait, Derek Carr threw over 300 yards, and I'm going to say, remember I told you, he's averaging over 300 yards this season.
We'll pass on that one, and we'll go into, we're going to have
another pass.
Touch on this one. Granted, I think they're okay this week. You'll at least have a win on your docket. Jacksonville Jaguars at the Los Angeles Rams. 13 is the spread. I know Jacksonville's really bad. I'm a little confused how a team on a 3-game losing streak and is averaging 2 picks, including a pick 6 for the last 3 weeks, somehow has a 2-touchdown spread. But over-under sits at 48.5, 7 first half, 23.5 in this one. I don't think there's a question on who's going to win this, but I just can't touch the 13, and I'm tired of taking Jacksonville and not getting my backdoor cover, though every time it sets up for them to drive down the field and get a cheap touchdown at the end to get that backdoor cover. So I was just a cross-off on this game until I see the Rams' offense functional and defense. We went over this. We go over. It's not that they're playing bad. I just want it more explosive. It just seems sort of tame. And I want plays being made on that side of the ball, especially with the type of money that you're selling out for the defensive players. So I'm just a no-go on this. I'm curious on you.
Yeah, I'm also a no-go. Now, I will say this, since we didn't have our review show, I do have to at least get 30 seconds of venting here. I will say, I mentioned the last week, I didn't care whether they won that game or lost the game versus Green Bay, but I wanted to see them play better. As you mentioned, the defense this season so far hasn't been bad. They were actually not, they're in the top 10, top 15 in most categories. The issue is that you have a lot of big name players, and they're not putting up the fancy stats, the sacks and the picks and the turnovers, the fumbles forced. They're not causing those as much as they did the previous season when they were the number one ranked defense. So that's why it's a good talking point if you're talking about that Rams defense, but they're not playing bad. The offense is basically what's been struggling as of late. They looked a little bit better versus Green Bay. I think the downfall for that game was the coaching. The coaching and going for it, in that first half on fourth down inside your own 30. Bonkers. I have no idea what McVay was thinking, especially when you look at the final outcome of that game. It could have gone either way had the game been managed properly, but that's neither here nor there. That was that game. Now we're looking at this game. This is the only game this week that we have where both teams are coming in with at least a 3-game losing streak. Both of these teams have been playing pretty bad over the last few weeks. Obviously, the Rams are a lot better on paper, but at minus 13, I'm probably not going to touch it, especially since the Rams have allowed at least 28 points in 3 straight games. So something to be concerned about. But the Rams are going to win this game, and I feel pretty confident saying that. I'm just not taking that 13-point spread, and I'm not going to pick my team because I need them to win this week.
Yeah. We'll touch on it a little bit, this game, the Rams just overall, because we didn't have our review show. You mentioned it, that weird fourth down call. I'm always, more pro going for it on fourth down. You're a little bit less, not so much, but
situational.
Yeah,
I'm a little less, but I'm situational.
Even then, I don't even know what the first down gets you. So you get that first down, and now it's first and 10 on the 32. It's not like
there's no guarantee you're going to get anything.
Yeah, it's not like you're going to automatically go down and score, and that's what confused me. It's now first and 10 on the 32 with 6 minutes left in the first quarter. Even if it was like the fourth quarter and you want to keep the ball and try to run out the clock and the game, I could maybe talk myself into it. But the only thing that's going to do is get you a first down. You might go 3 and out on the next 3 possessions, then you're punting. So what do you gain by that other than handing Green Bay the ball? I mean, they got a little lucky because Green Bay didn't go down and score, but they gave them a free 3 points. And, basically if they get a touchdown there, go down 14-0 in Green Bay, that game's over. So I just didn't understand the risk reward of that. And, we don't need to go into, Matthew Stafford and his struggles. I don't even know if they're struggles. This is pretty much what Matthew Stafford has been his whole career. It's a lot of yards, a lot of touchdowns, a lot of, turnovers.
Not to be a Matthew Stafford defender here because, it, and I stated it on the show coming into the season. I wasn't completely sold on the idea of swapping Goff for Stafford because I didn't know the discrepancy between both of them was going to be that wide. If just on paper, just off, listening to sports media, you would think Stafford's been playing really, really, really bad, especially over the last few weeks. But I read some stats somewhere. I can't remember where I saw it, but it said if Matthew Stafford were to average 1.5 interceptions per game for the rest of the season, he still wouldn't match last season's total by Jared Goff. So that may be a little bit of a silver lining there. But, one thing I did want to bring up really quick before we move on to the next game, I think one of the biggest issues for the Rams, and they have to figure this out probably due to the fact they don't have Cam Akers, it's that early on this season, they were wowing everybody because they were very explosive on offense. They're the big play team. If you want to watch a big play, you want to watch the Rams and Cooper Kupp and Stafford and, Robert Woods. They were the big play team. And it's come back to bite them in the behind over the last few weeks because when they can't get that big play, they go 3 and out. And when their defense is giving up as many points as they've given up over the last 3 weeks, you're going to start to get behind, and it's going to make you more desperate, and that's where you're going to start making more mistakes the way he's been making them. So, just something I noticed as I was watching some Ram film earlier this week.
Yeah, they should probably get that clip of Odell Beckham, and that's probably sums up his whole career. Beats a corner on man-to-man, hits a big-time play, then comes up and grabs his back. I think that just pretty much sums up everything that is Odell Beckham. We'll move on to the next game. good luck sorting this one out. The Baltimore Ravens, who somehow win games, though I don't think they've played well since about week, 7, but yet don't really lose all that often. And then the Pittsburgh Steelers, who do still somehow have a winning record, but wow, they look awful. So Baltimore going into Pittsburgh, 4.5-point favorites, 44 is the total. 3 first half, 21.5 is the first half total. Any idea on this game? Because I don't think I can touch Baltimore at 4.5 from what I've seen from them. And Pittsburgh, yikes.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I was kind of hoping that you were actually going to have a sell for me on this game because I'm confused as to what I could bet in this particular matchup. You mentioned that both of these teams have struggled at one point or another this season. I mean, the Ravens almost lost to the Lions. That should tell you everything you need to know there. They've definitely been beatable this season, although defensively they've been pretty stout. I believe this season so far they're giving up about 84.2 yards on the ground, which is one of the top rush defenses in the league. So they can definitely stifle the run, but their issue has been putting up points as of late and also stopping the deep ball. They've had issues with it over the last few weeks, and I don't know if it's going to rear itself this week against a divisional rival. But, this is always a fun matchup to watch. It's always been one of my favorite matchups, going back even a few years when it's super low scoring affair, but, you knew you were going to get a very physical defensive game. And that's kind of what I'm hoping will happen in this one because I'm actually going to watch this game. But I don't know which way I'm leaning, and I was kind of hoping you'd be able to sell me on this.
Oh, I'd have to sell you on the Baltimore side of things because I don't know. I think Pittsburgh's done. Now, every time I say that, Mike Tomlin, stirs up some sort of magic potion, gets a punt block, and ends up winning the game. The only thing I could tell you is maybe Baltimore's offense looks better. Lamar didn't play the week before in Chicago. Came back, looked really, really bad in the Cleveland game. I say that, and they won 16-10. So technically, they would have covered that 4.5. Though, they turned the ball over 4 times, and thank goodness Cleveland has a bye this week, or I think we'd both be hammering that disgrace of a franchise. But the only thing I can tell you is Pittsburgh's defense, just has too many injuries. The offense can't do anything. So I'd say the probability would be a Baltimore rout. But I think what we've seen from Baltimore, you can't ever tell me Baltimore is going to rout somebody this year.
Yeah, and that's my biggest concern is offensively, they just haven't really put much on tape to make me feel confident that they can do to Pittsburgh's defense what was just done to them this last week. Obviously, if I had to pick between Cincinnati and Baltimore, I'd probably lean a little bit more towards Baltimore, but you saw what Cincinnati did to Pittsburgh last week. This is also a divisional opponent. Can Baltimore put up the same type of offense? I don't think they can. It's a whole different it's a completely different offensive scheme between Baltimore and Cincinnati. But as you mentioned, a lot of injuries on defense for Pittsburgh. I don't know. I don't know which way I'm leaning, to be completely honest with you. This is probably a no-go for me personally, just because I don't know which way to lean.
Yeah, I think this should sum up the NFL this season. Baltimore, right now the number 1 seed in the AFC, would have home field advantage and a bye. And we are scared to take them at -4.5 versus a team that lost 43-6 to the Bengals last week.
Yeah, that sums up the current state of the NFL in a nutshell.
Yeah. Maybe we put Baltimore in our back pocket because we only got a couple games left, and they aren't much better. I'm going to see if you can talk me into this one. Fresh off passing Ray Rhodes on the win percentage in coaching the San Francisco 49ers. Come off a nice home win versus the Vikings. They go to the Seattle Seahawks. They're 3.5-point favorites. That hook is eating me up inside, which is what's making me not want to take San Francisco here. Seattle, once again, that offense did not look good. I don't even know if DK Metcalf is still playing receiver for the Seattle Seahawks. Because
he had one catch last week?
He had one catch for 13 yards. 3.5 for the Niners, 45.5 over under. 2.5 on the first half, 23.5 total for the first half. Do we dare take the Niners minus 3.5 on the road versus Seattle here? Or is just...
I'll tell you what.
I can't do that on that hook.
If it was 2.5, I'd feel a little more comfortable taking San Francisco because I feel like if it came down to it, they could win by a field goal. The issue is it's the 3.5. I don't like that spread. Even for Seattle, they haven't shown much, but this is the type of game that Seattle will step up for. A divisional opponent, a team that they basically faced off with, over the last few years since Russell Wilson's been there. It was either the 49ers or the Seahawks that were basically vying for the top spot in the NFC West. So I could totally see Seattle really stepping up for this game. The issue is that San Francisco's been playing pretty well, actually. And, even last week versus Minnesota, a game that I thought they would lose, they surprised me and they came out and they won. They were able to slow down the Vikings enough to pull off the win. But even then, that's not saying much because they needed a lot of big plays late in that game in order to pull off the win, and they barely made it happen. So I'm not very confident either way, to be completely honest with you. I don't think I could sell you on either one of these teams. It's crazy to say, but an NFC West matchup, 3.5-point spread, Seattle at home, 12th man, and I can't even give you Seattle. It's wild to me.
Yeah.
For what it's worth.
I can't.
For what it's worth, Seattle has won 13 of the last 15 versus San Francisco.
Yeah, I think I can't talk myself in Seattle because I'd hop all over this plus 3.5 at home. But they have just looked so inept on offense, and the defense has looked better, but I wouldn't call it anything that's memorable. And that being said, Seattle's probably out of the playoff mix, but you look at the standings, they're basically 2 games out. San Francisco being one of the teams that has one of those last playoff spots. Seattle wins this one, that gains a gain on them. Now, they have a lot more teams to jump, but, they are a winning streak away. I can't tell if Russell's just bad right now or he's hurt, but that offense isn't what it was, the first couple weeks of the season. But they seem to own San Francisco, and I can't make myself take that 3.5 hook on San Francisco, even though theoretically San Francisco has been playing pretty well here.
Yeah. I mean, listen, maybe I can sell you once I give you this little bit of information. I'm sure you're aware, but Seattle did sign Dynamite David's favorite running back, future Hall of Famer, the guy who was going to go down in history books for bringing the Titans back to glory. Adrian Peterson, the whole day Peterson has signed with the Seahawks.
Yeah, I saw that. I wondered if with Alex Collins and Adrian Peterson, they were going to have the slowest running back tandem in NFL history.
Listen, if they need another one, we can throw Sony Michel in there. We'll send him over there.
Well, they need someone to be able to not catch passes out of the backfield. So
okay, that doesn't help.
We'll have to come back. We need 2 more games. There are 2 left. I'm not sure either of these are takeable. One of them might be, but I don't think this next one is. Denver Broncos, Kansas City Chiefs. 9.5 for the Chiefs here. If you could tell me which Denver's showing up, the 86 Bears defense or the, one that gets shredded defense, I lean a little more Chiefs. You have everybody going with the Andy Reid off a bye, but 9.5 for this Chiefs team. I'm not bullish on grabbing that, even though I think they'll win this one pretty easy with the Broncos going to Kansas City. Can you stomach the 9.5? Would you want to take the points here?
No, even with the little tidbit that Kansas City has won 11 straight versus Denver. Even with that little bit of information, can't do it. And as you mentioned, I don't know which Denver team's showing up, and just as much, I don't know which Kansas City team is showing up. Is it the team that we've seen over the last couple of weeks that has played well enough to get a couple of wins? Because they still haven't been playing stellar. They have looked a little bit better defensively. They've stepped their game up a lot compared to the way they started off this season. So it's helped them get a couple of wins. But offensively, they're still not the Chiefs. They still don't look like the Chiefs. So a spread at 9.5, against a divisional opponent that has the potential to play really good defense. I'm sorry, but it seems like a recipe for a bad Sunday, and I just can't jump on it, and I can't advise you to do so either.
Yeah, I can't take that many points on the Chiefs, but I want no part of the Broncos. I'm tired of picking Broncos games because I admit I have no idea what's coming out of that side. 1 week they decide to run the ball 400 times and gain 1 billion yards. The next week they're throwing 50 times. 1 week the defense is creating 15 turnovers in a game. The next week they're giving up 600 yards. So I'm done betting on the Broncos one way or the other. And, the Chiefs in big spreads. It just hasn't lended itself to a lot of wins. So I'm a no-go there. Monday Night Football has the main event game of the week, probably one of the top 5 games of the season so far. New England goes into Buffalo. Buffalo is 3-point favorites here, 42.5 on the over/under. Half point in the first half spread, 21.5 on the first half over/under. I'm curious, which way are you leaning here? You like the 3? You like the points? You think this is going to be a defensive game? Do you think this goes a different way and gets into an offensive game here? I'm curious what your feelings are on this one.
I think that the Patriots are due for a little bit of a letdown. They've been playing so well over the last few, handful of weeks that I think they caught a lot of people off guard. If I'm not mistaken, they currently sit in first place in the AFC East.
Yes.
Over Buffalo. So I believe this game is very important for Buffalo because I believe it's going to determine the trajectory that each team's going to take going into the latter half of the season. Obviously, home field advantage is going to be huge, especially if you're a team like the Buffaloes and the Patriots who tend to get that really home field advantage type weather, during the playoff season. So I think that the Bills are probably a little bit hungrier in this matchup. I think they can pull off the win. I know that the spread seems pretty favorable for, such an important game. But to me, I think the smarter play here, just based off the way both teams have been playing lately, would probably be to take the over in the points here. And that's only because New England has quietly actually been scoring a lot of points. And they've gone up against pretty tough teams that have had pretty good defenses, and they've still been able to put up points. So I feel like the safer play here would be to take the over. But if you're looking to get a little more daring, a little more action, I'd probably jump on the Bills -3.
Yeah, I like the Bills here at -3. I know you're getting taxed a little bit here, but, it sounds like a broken record. I say it, every week. But of the 7 wins on the Buffalo Bills, all 7 have been by 15 points or more. That continued last week on Thanksgiving Day versus the Saints. So basically they either win big or they lose. So the spread hasn't even really been a factor. So I think that continues here. Maybe we get a close game, but I just kind of like Buffalo here. The Patriots have been getting a lot of love. But I think Buffalo comes to play at home on Monday Night Football here. I think we get a little bit more Josh Allen running. We saw a little bit of that last week. I think that trend continues. So I like the Bills at -3 here. even though the number looks a little bit, off because New England's been so hot. But I think money's coming in on the Patriots, and I want to be on Buffalo here at -3 because I think they're the better team. They've had some letdowns this year, but they've also blown out a lot of people. So I like the -3. I think this will be a little bit more of a shootout than people think. Both the Patriots and Bills have really, really good defensive numbers. But that being said, if you looked at both these teams' schedules, they're both on the lower end. They've played a lot of teams, including a bunch of teams in their own division, that just aren't good offensive teams, which will help boost your defensive numbers there. So I think this one has a little bit more of a chance to hit that shootout. So I think this low number, 42.5, also goes over. So I'd be okay on closing out our mutuals here, taking Buffalo -3 and the over at 42.5 on this game.
I like it.
All right, a lot of action on the Bills and Patriots. So that will be our 5. We're going to go with, what's our first one? I believe our first one is the Vikings at -7 over the Detroit Lions. The Miami Dolphins -6 over the New York Giants. I believe we had the
4.5, wasn't it?
Eagles and Jets at 45. And then lastly, we got the Bills -3 and the over at Bills Patriots at 42.5. So those are our 5 mutual picks. Let's get into our best bets for the week. I think I'm going to be lame again and not have a large slate of games. How many do you got?
Well, I originally had 3 coming into the show, but I'm gonna go with 5 so that I can kind of spread the love a little bit. But honestly, 3 is probably my comfort zone, but I'm gonna go with 5.
Yeah, I'll try to work my way and add a couple in there, but I think I have 2 right now that I'm really comfortable with. So why don't you start us out, and I'll see if I can add 1 or 2 in there.
Okay, to start you off, I'm going to take the Minnesota Vikings -7 versus Detroit Lions.
All right, I'm going with the Buffalo Bills -3 in this game. I like I said, I think the Bills, who have been blowing people out, are losing outright. Good number here at the 3 at home on Monday Night Football. They tend to play out for these big-time games.
For my second game, I am going to take the Philadelphia Eagles at -6.5 versus New York Jets.
All right, Philadelphia Eagles -6.5 versus the New York Jets. All right, I guess I'll throw one in there. I'm going with the Miami Dolphins -6 over the New York Giants here. So that'll be my number 2 play of the day. And then I'll have 2 more I'll throw in there for you. What do you got next?
Okay, I'm making an executive decision, and I'm canceling this one. I had it written down. I actually have money on it now, but I'm going to cancel it off the show because I don't feel confident. I had the Raiders at -1.5. That's been canceled. Scratch that one. I'm going to go ahead and take the Bills at -3.
All right. I'm going to... These are my plays, so we fill out the show. There probably won't be a ton of money riding on them on Sunday. Keep that in mind. So I'm going with the Cincinnati Bengals -3 over the Chargers.
And for my last one, I've got the Bills hitting the over at 42.5.
All right, my last one. I will ride the Washington football team once again as my plays on the show. But I don't know if I've quite talked myself into putting money on it, but the Washington football team at +1.5 for us.
If that's the case, don't put any money on this, anybody. No money on this. But I'll take the Raiders again at -1.5, just so we have a little head-to-head action.
Somehow they will figure out a way to push a 1.5 point, so neither of us lose.
Yeah. Hey, listen, I'll take a push. I'll gladly take a push in that game.
All right. That's our show for the week. Where can we find you, Achilles?
As always, you can find me on Twitter at TD Achilles.
Be sure to like and subscribe. We're going to have our college football playoff preview show tomorrow airing out. And then Dynamite David will be back switching from college football to college basketball. And we'll have our college basketball preview, start getting into that. We'll have our big bowl pick'em show and maybe a Achilles Rain appearance on the Bowl Pick'em show just to see what he has in his head for college football. Always a little fun in there. All right.
It's not very good.
That's our show, and we're out.